So we are, like I said 3 times, I think already. We're closing down this stewardship series, and one of the wild things about it is actually I think last week was maybe our highest attended impact service that wasn't like a Christmas or Easter or one of those in the middle of a stewardship series. So that was kind of amazing. And but in week 1, we remember we talked about stewardship as allegiance more than amounts, right? And that it was about the Imago Dei, the image of God on us, and that God is after our hearts, right? And then in week 2, if you were here for that, we talked about where Jesus says that if you want to know where your heart is, you check your bank statement. You can check your checkbook. Like, if remember checkbooks, right? You used to write. Does anyone still write in their checkbook? Thanks, Cindy. Cindy and Scott. There we go. More. Okay, cool. So you used to write, and that you could flip through, and you could see where your heart is, right? Because that's we tend to do that. And so then last week we talked about looking out, right? What are we doing for others? And that we said, remember, we're some of the richest people to ever walk. And to be prepared to share. And so we talked about being ready, budgeting, all that fun stuff, being ready to share. And so when we dive in today, if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Acts chapter 4. Acts is the 5th book of the New Testament, so Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, if you're looking for it. And we'll be in chapter 4. Now, Acts is if you're not familiar with the book of Acts, it's a historical account, and it's the sequel to Luke, right? So you have Luke and you have Acts written by Luke, okay? And what he's doing, he's writing an orderly account of what was happening in the church, like. And he's writing to this guy named Theophilus, right? And so this is where we're gonna, just a disclaimer before we get into the text. This is a passage. I literally text Pastor Robin in the middle of prepping the sermon. I go, this is a tough text. It's rough, and it reads, and this is so. How do I say this? I am not one to water a text down. If you've been here through Matthew, you know it's difficult, right? We don't make it soft. I don't try to make it easier to understand, but I'm not trying to make it easier to live. But this passage, it reads like it reads a bit like a Marxist manifesto to some degree on just the not social, but communism, or kind of thinking of those things when I was reading it. But what Luke is laying out is not an economic policy, all right? Luke is not laying out an economic policy or even commands, okay? So this is my disclaimer. This is not a policy, and these are not commands, but he is explaining to us what has been happening in the church, what was going on in the early church, okay? So that's my disclaimer. You want to dive in? Should we dive in? Okay. Acts 4, verse 23, or 32. Now, the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and one soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common, right? And so this idea then, that this speaks to the kind of the core idea of stewardship. You familiar with fiduciary responsibility? Anybody? Right? Yeah, so fiduciary responsibility is like there's if you invest with a company, say you invest your money with a company, they are required, right, to do the best that they can for you, the person that invested with them, right? And so that's the same kind of idea that's happening here, that when they're saying they're holding everything as one and open-handed. And so the understanding is that God has entrusted us with blessings, entrusted us with gifts. Be it financial, physical, time. Like, we've been entrusted with things in our lives. We are a fiduciary, right? We are to always use what we have to bring glory to God, to do what would make God's name great, and people would know. And so that's how this passage kind of begins, that Jesus, I don't know if you once told a story about a master who left his home for a while, and did you know the story? He leaves talents or money with some of his servants. Remember, he leaves 10 with one servant and 5 with another, and leaves 1 with another. And remember, the guy with 10 comes back with 10. The guy with 5 comes back with 5 more, 10 more, 5 more. But the guy with 1, if you remember what he did, is he was afraid, and he buried his talent. Right, he buried his treasure and comes back. And the only one that Jesus or that the master was frustrated with was the one that didn't try. Right, it was the one who didn't do anything with what they've been giving. So it wasn't necessarily what came out of what you did, but that you actually did something with what you've been given. And so God has given us all kinds of things, and we need to be trustworthy and a fiduciary to that gift. You tracking? Okay, good. All right. Now let's take a deep breath. That didn't sound deep. Okay. Oh, I can smell that one. No. Now, this doesn't mean, let me just say what it doesn't mean, okay? That we should all leave here today and list our houses with Jason Smith. Is he here? He didn't make it. All right, good. So, it's like that's not what's happening here. Because listen, all the way later in the Acts, these same people still have houses, right? Like, so what they're doing is they're saying that it's available. What I have is available to you. Like, someone just asked me about a trailer, right? It's like, I got a trailer, someone wanted to borrow. It's like, yeah. Well, it's like we're living open-handed, right? They were never going mine. They were never going, no, that's off limits. You can't have that. That is just my stuff. But it was, no, the community is in need, and so I have something that the community needs, and so I bring it forward. The Christian life, hear me, the Christian life does not sync with hoarding. They are antithetical, right? They do not work together. The question that we should be asking ourselves when we look at our stuff is, how thick is the dust? Right? How thick is the dust on the things that we have that we're not using? Right? Because we have a tendency to hold on. Some people just get rid of everything. God bless you. You're amazing people. Let me say this. I have a tendency to hold on to some things. Like, you should go into my garage, and I know I'm stepping on toes because I'm stepping on mine, right? Like I have nuts and bolts for things I know I'll never use. But maybe one day, right? It's like, so I have that, but I have some dusty items that need to be given away and made available to people. And so that got me thinking. And I talked to Pastor Robin, and she's going to mention this as well in the traditional service. So are you familiar with these free sites these community free sites? Your wife calls or your spouse calls you and goes, hey, I need you to go to this stranger's house and take something off their porch. Right? Which is a wild thing. But it's happened, and then my wife will put stuff on the porch, and then my dog will try to eat, whoever comes to the window, right? Like, it's kind of wild. But I was thinking, what if the church was able to overwhelm those sites with free stuff, right? What if we as a church started, and I was like, well, also, how could we know that it's coming from this church? So I was thinking we could make tags that say, just this Acts 4 verse, and just, free, and just the website or whatever, and just say, listen, we just want to overwhelm the community. There's so much free stuff that we have. We want to give you because we live open-handed. And I thought that would be a really cool spring cleaning, right, type of move. And so maybe look forward to that. If you're interested in that, there'll be more information to come. So, verse 33. With great power, the apostles gave their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all, right? And so simply put, right, the Christian testimony, or the witness, right, to the community is not just preached, it's embodied. And that's what I mean by this. It's like we're not just saying these things, we need to be about these things, right? And so it's like the community should look at the church and go, these people are kind of weird, right? Like they're kind of weird because while we're trying to collect things, the church people just start giving away things, right? It's like that's what's going on here. Like, you could almost hear the city whispering, like, what kind of people give like that? What kind of people just give their stuff? What do they know that we don't? And the simple answer is that they've seen a resurrection. This early church, they had seen a dead man come back to life, and once you've watched death lose its power, you stop clinging so tightly to your stuff. And so in verse 34 it says, there was not a needy person among them. There was not a needy person among them. For as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. Now, I know we joked last week about being rich and all that stuff. But as I was preparing this, I was really thinking about what it means to be in need. And I realized I don't really know. I've been blessed, right? To a point where I know if my world collapsed, I got 5 friends, I got family, I know I could walk into their house any time of the day and just have food, right? I have those people, and I've always had those people, right? And so I'm blessed in that way, but what's happening in this passage is that when you become a Christian, when these people in this first century Christian movement, they had to give up their foundations. They had to give up their support systems, right? Remember, I think it was a couple weeks ago, or maybe months ago, in Matthew 10:34, it said this, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it." And these Christians believed that. They lived that, because when they became Christians, when they started following Jesus, they lost those support systems. It did divide households, right? Because it was against the Jewish religion to call Jesus God, right? And so so you're losing your social safety nets at this point. And so Rome, in the large cities of Rome, there was some social safety nets for the poor, for some of the poor folks. But once you got into these other cities, these Galilee and these outside of these major towns, Rome didn't. They just wanted your money, right? Rome was just like, here's your tax, thank you, hope you figure it out. And so the temple, but the Jewish temple then had their own systems. And so they would, because Rome didn't care and was abusing their people, the temple would then also have a support structure for widows, orphans, right? And they would, but by this time, in Acts 4, by the time this is happening, they are being hunted down. Christians are being hunted down by Saul and doing all, and so they are kicked out of the temple. So they've lost family, they've lost temple, right, community, and they have no government help. That's what it means to be in need. And so they're going, this is not just, I don't get to shop at the store I want to shop at, or I don't get to eat the brands of things that I want to eat. Like, that's not this. This is, I don't have it, and I'm not going to make it, but I believe in Jesus, and I'm going to be a part of this community. And so that's why the community would come together. This wasn't necessary. At first, this wasn't about outsiders. This wasn't about people that weren't Christian. This was just like, you're a part of this now, and you don't have a place to live. You don't have anything to eat. You have nothing. And so they would come together to make sure that the community of God, the people of God, could make it. And that begins to go out into the world, and that will impact people. So when these believers were shared everything, they weren't being idealists, right? They were surviving. It wasn't this this economic policy. It's like, well, if we all did this, it was like, no, they're just surviving. It's like, you're not going to make it, so I'm going to make sure that you do. And so the church became the family, the bank, and the pantry. And so that's why Luke says there's no need among them, because when the world stopped caring, grace stepped in, and this hits differently this month than it did last month. Right? Because we have people, millions, probably going with at least less than they had before, which probably wasn't much in the first place. And so what if this is an opportunity for the church? what if, when trust in the system is shaking, the church steps in? What if we become the ones who quietly fill in the gaps? Who steps in where the checks stop? Who remind our neighbors that God's provision has never depended on a line item in a federal budget, that the church has an opportunity not just to speak hope, but to actually supply hope. To turn our gratitude into groceries, to make Acts 4 more than a memory, to make it a map for how we live when the world feels uncertain. Because when the world stops caring, the church steps in. And we should be here. Like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're about, right? We have 2 community meals here that feed a lot of people, right? There's all kinds of things happening here, but it's getting bigger. We had somebody here that got robbed. Their card, one of their benefit cards got just taken and emptied. And so somebody here just sent them a week's worth of groceries, right? It's like, that's literally what this is, right? It's like here's some groceries, here's food. Like, that's what we're doing. There was no vote, right? There was no one asked the pastor if they could do it, right? It's just did it, right? And with technology, it's so easy to just get on your phone and send groceries anywhere in the world, or at least the country, right? So, in verse 34 it says this, or it says verse 35, so we'll start at 34 again. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. And so this is the part of the series where we kind of tie it all together. And we decide as families or as individuals, we sit down and we decide this time of year, every year, if you're a member here or you attend here regularly, how much can I give next year? Or how much can I plan to give? Or how much do I feel called to give next year? And this is part of the reason that we do the offering in this. I believe, I don't want you to ever give because it was like a kind of an emotional talk or kind of, those types of things. I prefer that everyone goes home, right, and figures it out, what they want to do, and have it like we talk about budget. Like, don't do this without budgeting, right? Don't do this without talking about it, right? Those are all these things, and so you have to look inward, have discussions, and pray, and then turn these cards in. Okay? But this is our way of laying it down at the apostles' feet, of saying, God, we trust you enough with our generosity before the need even shows up. Because that's what the early church did. They didn't wait for someone to beg. They built a system of grace, right, before there was a crisis. That's what this moment is for us. It's not a fundraiser, right? It's a faith exercise, a way of saying, Lord, you've been faithful, and now we want to be found faithful too. And so every year I've talked about this generosity ladder. And I haven't actually called it that, but it's kind of the way that I see these things framed out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to list out rungs on a ladder, if you will, that each of us will find ourselves somewhere on, right? And so the reality is that this is formed for us to be grown, stretched, and strengthened, right? This is not to make anyone feel like they're not where they need to be or they're not where they want to be with their giving. So if that's coming at you, that's not from me, right? This is about growing and being stretched. And so what I hope that you'll do is identify yourself on the rung somewhere, and then challenge yourself just to take a step up on the rung. That's what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. So at the beginning of the ladder, you have people that don't give to church at all, right? And so with that, there's usually a lot of reasons. First off, it could just be don't have it, perfectly fine, right? But also it could be I don't trust the church, not this church, but church in general. I've seen too much abuse. I've seen too much unethical use of money. I've just seen wasted money, right? That is a real thing for people that have come from other churches. They go, I don't like the way that was. I don't trust churches with my money, right? So the first step on this rung would be to I just encourage you to give to something. Not even here. If you're not giving here and you're just work, because it's about working the generosity muscle, right? It's just about working about giving, just giving. It just doesn't come natural to us, right? So that, and then secondly with that, the other challenge would be to have a conversation with if you're wondering about the finances here, how they work, how much is it, what are we doing with all of it? Have those conversations. Like, let's sit down, let's look over the budget. If you want to look over a budget, like that's your thing, I'll look over a budget with anybody, right? So those types of things. So you start working the muscle somewhere else, if that's what you need to do, but work the muscle. Start giving to something. You tracking? Okay. The next step. So the second rung we'd call unplanned givers. All right? Unplanned givers are people that have not thought about giving until Brendan steps up here every Sunday and starts talking about it, right? And then you just kind of dig through and you try to find whatever maybe you have, and then it's just like, and you give it that way. And that's called an unplanned giver. And so can you guess what the next step for an unplanned giver would be? Make a plan. make a plan, right? So this is that when you start to plan your generosity, you're telling your heart this matters enough to prepare for. But all you do is you just take the amount that you gave last year, and you either got that in the mail, or you can guess, right? You can probably guess what you gave last year, and then just say, no, this is what I'm going to do this year. And that's what these cards can do, right? You write down, this is what I'm doing this year. This is what I plan to do this year, right? And so that's the next step. And so then the third rung, if you're a planned giver, this next one is very simple, this next rung. You take the amount you plan on giving, and you switch it to when, and you change when you give it, right? So you're giving the same amount, but now you're changing when you give it. So instead of giving what's left over at the bottom of the purse or the pocketbook, you're going, okay, at the beginning of the week or the beginning of the month or payday, right? It's called first fruits. And Exodus 23:19 says this, the choicest of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God, right? And so the idea is like, these are the first things that I get as soon as I get it. And so there's a couple ways you can do this. I like to, for me, I set it up in like an online, in our online giving has a reoccurring gift thing. And I do that because I'm just bad with memory and all that stuff. My wife knows, right? I forgot that. I don't remember having that conversation. So I set it up like that. But what I did in the beginning, my grandfather, when I was 16, and I got my first kind of real job, he just gave me a box of envelopes and said, all right, when you get paid, you put 10% in here. That's what my grandpa just told me. I was like, oh, grandpa said so. So that's what I did. And but he built that muscle in me very early on, and it's a little bit easier when you're working 12 hours at Taco Bell, all right? It's not that much money. But that's kind of how this thing works. And so if you're a first fruits giver, okay, then this is where kind of the stretching part starts to happen. Because your generosity, it's stretching and cultivating it, if you will. We've built the habit of giving, right? And now we can stretch our giving. And so in 1 Corinthians 16, Paul tells us this. Now, about the collection for the Lord's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collection will have to be made. So one of the goals of generosity is to give in proportion of what you make, right? So because there's no there's no flat fee to be in the church, right? That's not what's happening here, right? It's like but as we're more blessed, we need to be more of a blessing, right? It's like as with your income goes your generosity. And so what we do here is we try to find the percentage of our giving, okay? What is our percentage of giving? How do we do this? I forget how to. You just take what you gave last year, right, or last month, and what you made, divide it by what you made last month or last year, and then you just move the decimal point over two spots. Like, that's your percentage, right? And then the challenge then is to just, say it comes out to 2.5%. Okay, I wonder, what would it take? How could I look at my budget to do 3%, right? It's just a stretch for you, right? And so you can work those things out and have those conversations. But the ultimate goal, and the one I prefer, I think this is kind of a Dave Ramsey, the give 10, save 10, live off 80, right? Seems to work if you can start to move towards that. Like I don't want you to hear, you should be able to do all these things tomorrow. Okay? Please don't hear that, right? This takes cultivating, right? This takes training within your own families, because if you're married, you probably won't agree on money all the time. What? Yeah, right? So you have these conversations, and we do these things, and it's about being together as a family and doing it and going, we're a part of the vision and the mission of this church, and so we're supporting it in the way we feel called to. But listen, the goal isn't perfection. It's participation. It's about learning to live open-handed enough that God can move through you without resistance. So in 2 Corinthians 9:7, it says, each of you must give as you have made up your mind, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. That's the spirit of this entire series, right? That we don't give because we're pressured. We give because we're grateful, right? And when gratitude becomes your reason, generosity becomes your reflex. So the band can make their way up. So that's what the believers in Acts 4 discovered. A life where there was not a needy person among them, because grace had rewired their hearts. And church, may we be that kind of people. May we be that kind of church where this community knows where to come if they have a need. That this community knows who cares about them. And so these buckets are around. And again, if you're not prepared under compulsion, like I don't want you to give under compulsion or pressure or any of that. But these buckets are around. You can put your card in them if you want, or you can turn it in after you've talked about it. If you're like, no, we haven't really talked about this. Maybe we just wrote down last year's number or whatever it was, but we haven't prayed and thought and planned about this. And so in this moment, you can turn that card in one of these buckets. But thank you so much for being here through this. And I'm so excited about 2026. And I don't know if you can feel the energy moving around here, but things are going really well, and I just know God's doing something great in and around here. Y'all ready? All right, let's do this. Will you stand with us?